19. You need to see this for yourself. Jack's voice crackled through my phone, tense and hesitant. I'd never heard my best friend sound so uncertain. Parked outside the Grand Oaks. That luxury development on Hillcrest Drive. My stomach clenched. Alice had told me she was having lunch with her sister today. The Grand Oaks was nowhere near her sister's place. What am I supposed to be seeing, Jack? A pause. Just, get here. Third house on the right after the entrance. The white colonial with black shutters. He hung up before I could respond. I sat at my desk, staring at the quarterly reports I'd been reviewing. The numbers blurred together as my mind raced. After 15 years of marriage, I knew when something was wrong. Alice had been different lately, distant, always on her phone, working late. I'd told myself I was being paranoid. That the distance between us was just a phase, something we'd work through. But Jack wouldn't call me like this for nothing. 20 minutes later, I pulled up behind Jack's sedan, parking far enough back to stay hidden from the house. The autumn sun was setting early, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns. Through the windshield, I could see him waiting, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Before we do this, he said as I approached, I need you to promise me you'll keep it together. I nodded, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. Jack pointed to a large bay window on the first floor. The interior lights were on, giving us a clear view inside. Alice was there, perched on the arm of an expensive leather sofa. She was wearing the blue dress I'd given her for our anniversary last month, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. And she wasn't alone. The man with her was Gregory Bennett. I recognized him immediately. His face had been splashed across business magazines when his tech startup went public last year. He was at least 15 years younger than me, dressed casually in what probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. As I watched, he handed Alice a glass of wine. Their fingers brushed. She laughed at something he said, that musical laugh I used to think was just for me. Then he leaned in and kissed her. My vision tunneled. The world condensed to that single point of contact between them, that betrayal playing out in high definition through spotless designer glass. I must have taken a step forward because Jack's hand clamped down on my shoulder. Not here, he muttered. Not now. I let him guide me back to my car. My legs moved automatically, my mind a whirlwind of fragments, all the late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the new clothes, the way she'd stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. The signs had been there. I'd just been too trusting, too stupid to see them. How long have you known? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow and distant. Jack leaned against my car, his face drawn. I saw them together at Riverside Cafe last week. Thought maybe it was a business meeting. But then Sarah spotted them at the Marina Hotel on Saturday. While I'd been home alone, telling myself Alice's girls' weekend was good for her. You should have told me immediately. The words came out sharp, accusing. Would you have believed me? Jack's question hung in the air between us. If I'd just told you, without proof, would you have accepted it? He was right. I wouldn't have. I'd have defended her, maybe even ended our friendship over the accusation. That's who I was, trusting, loyal to a fault. Alice had always said it was one of my best qualities. The irony made me want to laugh, or maybe scream. What are you going to do? Jack asked quietly. I stared at the house, at the warm light spilling from its windows. Through the glass, I could still see them together, comfortable in their betrayal. Something cold and hard crystallized in my chest. Nothing, I said. Not yet. Jack raised an eyebrow. Nothing. She thinks I'm still that same trusting fool she married. The one who'd confront her in a rage, who'd make a scene and give her the perfect excuse to paint me as the villain. I turned to face him, and whatever he saw in my expression made him take a small step back. But I'm not that man anymore, Jack. I haven't been for a while. I hadn't told anyone, not even Jack, about the changes in my life over the past year. About the startup I'd been quietly building on the side, the patents pending, the investors circling. Alice thought I was still grinding away at my middle management job, living paycheck to paycheck. She had no idea I was about to close a deal that would make Gregory Bennett's fortune look like pocket change. "I'm going to give her exactly what she wants," I continued, my voice steady. "A reason to leave me for him. And then." A smile spread across my face, one that felt foreign on my lips. "Then I'm going to take everything." "John." Jack's voice held a note of warning. "Don't do anything stupid." "Stupid?" I laughed softly. "No. I'm done being stupid. I'm going to be smart about this. Methodical. She wants to play games. Fine. But she's about to learn she's not the only one who can keep secrets." I got into my car, my mind already racing with plans. As I pulled away from the curb, I caught one last glimpse of the house in my rearview mirror. Alice was still visible through the window, laughing at something Bennett had said. Let her laugh. Let her think she had the upper hand. ID spent 15 years being the dependable, predictable husband she could take for granted. Now it was time to show her, and Bennett, that they'd badly underestimated what I was capable of. The game was just beginning. The house was dark when I got home. A note on the kitchen counter told me Alice was working late. The casual lie made something twist in my gut, but I forced myself to stay calm as I poured a drink and sat down at my home office desk. My laptop held the truth she didn't know: emails from investors, term sheets for the acquisition, documents that would turn our comfortable life upside down. I'd been planning to surprise her with the news, to show her that her faith in me hadn't been misplaced. Now, those same documents felt like ammunition. I opened my phone and scrolled through recent photos. There we were at her company Christmas party, her smile bright as she introduced me to her colleagues. Had she been seeing him even then? Another photo from our anniversary dinner last month, her eyes meeting mine over candlelight. All of it felt tainted now, every memory called into question. My phone buzzed. A text from Alice: meeting running late. Don't wait up. Red heart. I stared at the heart emoji, remembering how she'd looked in Bennett's living room, so alive, so different from the distant woman she'd been at home. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to demand answers, to make her see how completely she'd shattered everything we'd built. But that wasn't the smart play. Instead, I typed, "No problem. Get your rest. Red heart." Then I opened my laptop and began to plan. First, I needed information. I knew Gregory Bennett's name and face, but I needed more. Jack worked in corporate intelligence. He could help me build a complete picture of the men who'd stolen my wife. More importantly, he could do it quietly, without leaving traces. Next, I needed to protect my assets. The acquisition was still under wraps, but once it went through, everything would change. I needed to make sure Alice couldn't touch any of it when the truth came out. I worked late into the night, making lists, considering angles, building contingencies. Around midnight, I heard her key in the lock. Her heels clicked on the hardwood as she made her way upstairs. She didn't check to see if I was still awake. I waited until I heard the shower running before I went up. By the time she emerged from the bathroom, I was in bed, pretending to be asleep. She slid in beside me, smelling of expensive perfume and lies. "John," she whispered. "Are you awake?" I kept my breathing steady, giving no sign that I'd heard. After a moment, she rolled away from me. In the darkness, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling. 15 years of marriage, and I'd never once doubted her. Never once questioned her love or loyalty. Now, lying next to her felt like sharing a bed with a stranger. But I could be patient. I could play the long game. Let her think she had me fooled while I put all the pieces in place. And when the moment was right, when everything was perfectly aligned, I would show her exactly what it meant to underestimate someone you claimed to love. The next morning, I maintained the routine we'd established over years of marriage. I kissed her goodbye as she left for work, told her to have a good day, played my part perfectly. But as soon as she was gone, I went into action. First call, my lawyer, Maria Chen. I'd hired her firm to handle the acquisition, but now I needed something more personal. "I need to speak with you," I told her. "In person. Today if possible. And Maria. This stays between us." She must have heard something in my voice because she cleared her schedule for a lunch meeting. Next, I called Jack. I need everything you can get me on Gregory Bennett. Personal history, business dealings, current lifestyle. Especially any patterns with women. John. He hesitated. Are you sure about this? More sure than I've been about anything in my life. He sighed. Give me a few days. And, be careful, okay? You're not thinking clearly right now. But that was where he was wrong. For the first time in years, I was thinking with perfect clarity. I spent the morning appearing to work while actually laying groundwork. A new email account, created with careful attention to privacy. A consultation with my financial advisor about restructuring my assets. A call to a private investigator recommended by Maria. At lunch, I met Maria at a small bistro far from both our offices. Her expression turned grave as I laid out what I knew and what I suspected. Before we go any further, she said, I have to ask, are you sure you want to do this? Once we start down this path. I'm sure. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos Jack had taken yesterday. My wife is having an affair with Gregory Bennett. And when I'm done, they're both going to regret ever meeting each other. Maria studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Hey, race, what we need to do. By the time I left the bistro, I had a clear plan of action. Maria would begin documenting everything, building a case that would protect my interests when the time came. More importantly, she helped me see angles I hadn't considered. Bennett's not stupid, Shed pointed out. He's likely protecting himself too. We need to be prepared for that. I spent the afternoon in my real office, not the middle management job Alice thought I still had, but the startup headquarters ID kept hidden from her. My team was excited about the upcoming acquisition, eager to finally go public with what we'd built. Just a few more weeks, I told them, maintaining my usual calm demeanor. Everything has to be perfect. Perfect timing. Perfect execution. Perfect revenge. That evening, Alice called to say she had a dinner meeting with clients. I told her I understood, that I'd grab something simple for myself. We exchanged our usual I love yous before hanging up. Alone in our house, I walked from room to room, seeing everything with new eyes. The photos on the walls, capturing moments I'd thought were real. The furniture we'd picked out together, planning our future. The life we'd built, now revealed as a carefully constructed lie. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack, got some preliminary info on Bennett. You're going to want to see this. I smiled as I typed back, tomorrow. I'm just getting started. A week passed. I played my role perfectly, the oblivious husband, too caught up in his mundane job to notice his wife slipping away. But behind that facade, everything was falling into place. Jack's intel on Bennett arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. We met in a quiet coffee shop downtown, away from our usual haunts. You're not going to like this, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Bennett has a pattern. The documents told a story that made my blood boil. Gregory Bennett had a history of pursuing married women, specifically wives of up-and-coming business rivals. 3 times in the past 5 years, had orchestrated similar scenarios. Each time, the husband's company had mysteriously lost key deals or faced unexpected regulatory hurdles shortly after. He's not just sleeping with Alice, Jack said quietly. He's trying to sabotage you. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. He picked the wrong target. There's more. Jack hesitated. Alice, she's done this before too. At her last company, with her former boss. The guy's wife found out, it got messy. That's why she changed jobs 2 years ago. 2 years ago. When she'd come home crying about workplace politics and toxic environments. When ID supported her decision to switch companies, proud of her for standing up for herself. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. Does Bennett know about her history? No evidence they knew each other before 6 months ago. Looks like they met at that charity gala in spring. The pieces clicked together. The gala I'd been too busy to attend. The night she'd come home glowing with excitement about new networking opportunities. What's your play? Jack asked. I pulled out my phone and showed him the email I'd received that morning. The acquisition was moving forward. In 3 weeks, the announcement would go public. Bennett thinks he's targeting a middle manager with a failing marriage, I said. He has no idea what's really coming. Neither of them do. That evening, Alice was actually home for dinner. She'd been extra attentive lately, perhaps compensating for her guilt. Or maybe just keeping me distracted. I was thinking, she said over dessert, maybe we should take that vacation we've been talking about. Just the two of us. I looked at her, really looked at her. She was beautiful in the soft lighting, her eyes bright with what I now recognized as calculation rather than love. 2 years of lies. Maybe more. That sounds perfect, I replied, smiling. But let's wait until after the quarter ends. Work is. I shrugged apologetically. You know how it is. Of course. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. No rush. Later, as she slept beside me, I finalized the next phase of my plan. The pieces were all in place. Now it was time to start the game. The charity auction was my masterstroke. ID spent weeks setting it up through a series of shell companies and intermediaries. A prestigious event at one of the city's most exclusive venues, benefiting a cause that just happened to align perfectly with Bennett's public image. Are you sure about this? Maria asked during our final review. Once we start, there's no going back. I showed her the latest photos my PI had captured, Alice and Bennett at his beach house, her wearing the bracelet ID given her for our 10th anniversary. I'm sure. The invitations went out. Bennett's ego wouldn't let him refuse, not with his competitors and peers on the guest list. And Alice? She'd be there as his +1, thinking I was away at a training conference. The night of the auction, I watched through the security feed as they arrived. Alice was wearing a new dress, one ID never seen. Bennett's hand rested possessively on her lower back as they worked the room. I adjusted my tuxedo and checked my reflection. Success looked good on me, the result of months of preparation finally paying off. Ready? Jack asked, straightening his own tie. I nodded, and we made our entrance. The look on Alice's face when she saw me was everything ID hoped for. Shock, confusion, fear, emotions chasing each other across her features as she tried to process my presence. Bennett, to his credit, recovered quickly. John Morrison, he said smoothly, extending his hand. I don't believe we've met formally. I shook his hand, noting the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes as he took in my perfectly tailored tuxedo, the confidence in my bearing. Mr. Bennett. Your reputation precedes you. I turned to Alice, whose face had gone pale. Darling, I'm sorry about the deception, but I wanted to surprise you. I know how much you support children's education. She stammered something about not expecting me. Bennett's hand tightened on her waist. The auction proceeded according to plan. I bid generously, drawing attention from the city's elite. Alice watched in growing horror as I casually threw around amounts of money that should have been impossible on my supposed salary. During a quiet moment, she cornered me by the bar. What are you doing here? She hissed. How are you? What is this? I sipped my whiskey. You know, it's funny. All those nights you were working late or having dinner with clients. I was actually working. Building something. Becoming someone you apparently thought I couldn't be. John, The thing is, Alice, you backed the wrong horse. I set down my glass. You thought Bennett was your ticket to the life you wanted. But in 3 days, when the markets open, my company's acquisition goes public. And then. I smiled. Then everyone will know exactly what you threw away. The color drained from her face. What are you talking about? Ask your boyfriend about Morrison Tech. Ask him why his team has been trying desperately to get information about our patents. I leaned closer. Better yet, ask him about Karen Mitchell. Or Diana Santos. Or any of the other wives he's used to try to sabotage his competitors. She took a step back. You're lying. Am I? Check his phone. The beach house was nice, by the way. That bracelet looks better on you than it did in the box I kept it in for our anniversary. I walked away, leaving her standing there. Across the room, Bennett was watching us, his expression calculating. He had no idea that while he'd been playing his little game, I'd been playing a much bigger one. The end game was approaching. And when the dust settled, they'd both learn the true price of betrayal. The morning after the charity auction, Alice didn't come home. My phone buzzed with a series of increasingly frantic texts. "We need to talk. Please answer me. This isn't what you think. John, I love you. I can explain everything." I let them go unanswered. Instead, I watched the pre-market trading numbers climb as rumors of the acquisition began to circulate. By noon, Bennett's company stock had dropped 12%. Jack called around too. "Bennett's going nuclear. He's trying to force an emergency board meeting. Let him." I smiled, remembering the look on Alice's face when she'd realized the truth. Everything's already in motion. The announcement hit the markets at exactly 3 p.m. Morrison Tech's acquisition of Vector Dynamics made headlines across every major financial network. Our patents, combined with Vector's distribution network, instantly created a technological powerhouse worth billions. Bennett's company, which had been betting heavily on competing technology, watched their market value plummet. Alice finally came home that evening. She looked exhausted, her designer outfit from the auction wrinkled, her makeup smeared. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded as soon as she walked in. "All this time, you were building something incredible, and you kept it from me. Like you kept things from me." I replied calmly, not looking up from my laptop. "How long have you been sleeping with Bennett?" She flinched. It's complicated," Greg said. "Greg," I interrupted, "has been using you to try to sabotage me. Just like he did with Karen Mitchell and Diana Santos." "Did he tell you about them? The other wives he seduced to get inside information about their husbands' companies?" "You're lying." But her voice wavered. I pulled out the folder Jack had given me and slid it across the coffee table. "See for yourself. Your boyfriend has a type, ambitious women married to his business rivals. He wines them, dines them, makes them feel special, all while gathering intelligence about their husbands' companies." Her hands trembled as she opened the folder. I watched her face as she read, saw the moment realization hit her. "Oh God," she whispered. "The funny thing is," I continued, my voice still calm, "if you'd just talked to me, been honest about what you wanted, I would have shared everything with you. The company, the success, all of it. We could have had it all together." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. Please, we can fix this. I'll end things with Greg, we can go to counseling. Check your email." She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. "ID sent the message an hour ago, divorce papers, already filed with the court." "John, please. You have two choices," I said, finally meeting her eyes. "Sign the papers and walk away with the settlement I'm offering, or fight me in court. But before you decide, you should know that Bennett's been recording your encounters. My PI found the videos on his private server. Apparently, it's how he ensures the wives' cooperation once he's done with them." All the color drained from her face. "He recorded us. Option 1, sign the papers, walk away with enough to start fresh somewhere else. Option 2, fight me, and those videos become evidence in a very public divorce trial. Your choice." She stared at me, this stranger who had replaced her reliable, predictable husband. "When did you become so cold?" "When I realized the woman I loved never really existed." I stood up, straightening my jacket. "You have 24 hours to decide." "Oh, and Alice. Bennett's probably going to call you soon. His company's stock is in freefall, and he's just discovered that all his attempts to access our proprietary information have been carefully documented. The SEC is very interested in patterns of corporate espionage." I walked out, leaving her clutching the divorce papers. In my car, I finally looked at my phone. 17 missed calls from Bennett. A single text, "We should talk." I started the engine, smiling as I typed my response, "My lawyers will be in touch." 2 days later, Alice signed the papers. She took the settlement and moved out of state, leaving behind 15 years of memories and lies. Bennett's company never recovered from the scandal. The SEC investigation uncovered years of corporate espionage, leading to his resignation and multiple indictments. I threw myself into running my newly expanded company, channeling all my anger and pain into building something even bigger. The press called me a tech industry visionary. Fortune magazine put me on their cover. Jack worried I was becoming too focused on revenge, too cold. Maybe he was right. But every time I thought about forgiveness, I remembered all the nights I'd spent alone while Alice was with Bennett. All the lies, the manipulations, the wasted years. One evening, about 6 months after the divorce, I got a letter from Alice. Inside was a worn photo from our honeymoon, both of us young and smiling on a beach in Maui. On the back, she'd written, "I'm sorry I couldn't see what was right in front of me." I stood at my office window, looking out over the city lights, turning the photo over in my hands. Then I dropped it into the shredder and went back to work. Some betrayals change you forever. The trick is making sure they change you into someone stronger, not just someone harder. But that's a lesson I'm still learning. 1 year after the divorce, I found myself back at the Grand Oaks. The house where I'd first discovered Alice's betrayal was up for sale. On impulse, I'd asked my realtor to arrange a viewing. Quite a property, the agent said as we walked through. The previous owner had to sell after some unfortunate business developments. I smiled, remembering Bennett's face splashed across the news during his SEC hearing. Had lost everything, his company, his reputation, his freedom. The justice system had finished what I'd started. Standing in the living room, I could still picture them together by the window. But the pain had dulled to a distant ache. Success was its own kind of healing. My phone buzzed, a text from Jack, "You're not going to believe who I just ran into." I called him immediately. "Alice is back in town," he said without preamble. "She's asking about you." Something twisted in my chest. "What does she want?" "To apologize," she says. "She's been in therapy. Claims she's changed." I walked to the window, the same one I'd watched through that night. And nothing. I told her you're doing well. That you're seeing someone. He wasn't wrong. Claire, the CEO of a renewable energy startup, had been in my life for 3 months. She was brilliant, driven, and most importantly, honest about what she wanted. Did Alice mention Bennett? He's taking a plea deal. She found out she wasn't his only, current project. Apparently, he was working multiple angles right up until the end. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I just felt tired. "Thanks for letting me know." Later that evening, I found an email from Alice in my personal account. "John. I won't ask for forgiveness, I don't deserve it. But you should know that losing you was the wake-up call I needed. I've spent the past year working on myself, understanding why I was so willing to throw away something real for an illusion. Bennett was a fantasy, a shortcut to the life I thought I wanted. I didn't see that you were building something incredible because I was too busy looking for the easy way up. By the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. I heard you're doing well. That you're seeing someone. I hope she appreciates the man you've become, the man you always were. Beneath the surface I was too blind to see past. Be happy. You deserve it. I sat in my home office, the city lights twinkling below. My laptop showed the latest projections for Morrison Tech. We were changing the industry, just as I'd always dreamed. The revenge that had driven me had transformed into something bigger, something that mattered. Claire called as I was contemplating a response to Alice. "Dinner?" she asked. "That new place on 5th. I looked at Alice's email one last time, then clicked delete. Dinner sounds perfect. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about building something so magnificent that their absence becomes irrelevant. Alice and Bennett had taught me that trust, once broken, can never be fully repaired. But they'd also taught me something more important, that betrayal doesn't have to define you. I'd lost a wife but found my purpose. Lost my faith in love but gained faith in myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was a fair trade. As I stepped into the elevator to meet Claire, my phone buzzed with another text from Jack. "You ever miss the old days?" I thought about the men I'd been, trusting, naive, content with mediocrity. Then I thought about who I'd become. "No," I typed back. "The old days are exactly where they belong, in the past." The elevator doors closed, carrying me down toward my future. Behind me, The past receded like a tide going out, leaving nothing but clear shores ahead. Some stories end with forgiveness. Others end with revenge. But the best endings are the ones where you finally understand that neither matters as much as what you build from the ashes of what you've lost.